That's good, dude.
Yeah.
That's kind of making me emotional, dude. Yeah, just like, when we're looking in the mirror and we're seeing the things that we don't want to see, when we're barely holding on, when we're being a great parent or the worst parent or the worst spouse. And the great part is we have access to be with God constantly because he's always near us, right? As he says, it's been a tough week, hasn't it?
Thanks for listening to Behind the Mic. This is your spiritual deep dive conversation of radio theology. And now here are your hosts, Pastor Daron Earlywine, Ryan Allward, and Lisa Graft.
Welcome to another episode of Behind the Mic, the spiritual deep dive of radio theology. And guys, this is the closet edition or quarantine edition of Behind the Mic and radio theology. We are quarantined, as you know, as I was going to say as a nation, but basically as a world. And so we're recording these episodes probably for the next couple weeks, actually, from our homes and from, I'm actually in my closet, which is not that big. And I think I just figured out that I'm too old to sit on carpet for, hours at a time. I may have to find like a way to construct a desk or something in my closet.
Well, if you gain the COVID-19 pounds, then you should have a little more cushion down there, and you'll be fine.
Listen, wow. that was harsh, and wow. and may be accurate, actually.
I'm just saying that was a helpful suggestion. I wasn't insinuating anything.
I have found myself taking comfort in food. I feel like I get excited when it's lunchtime because I've been, working at my home in my home office, and like I'm just in there all morning, and then it's like there's nowhere to go. I can't go to a restaurant. Like I don't see anybody, but I'm kind of like, oh, ham. I get to see ham.
Just ham. Yeah. Just eating chunks of it. Oh man. I did learn that today is National Burrito Day.
Ooh.
Qdoba hit me up and they were like, "Hey, you're under quarantine but still craving that burrito? Go ahead and get you a little burrito on National Burrito Day."
Yeah, Chipotle doing it too. Free shipping and free queso. Free shipping. Free delivery.
Yeah, I don't know. We talked a lot about obviously the quarantine and everything on this week's show, and one of the things that Ryan, that you said that I thought was great about these times, it's like life is holding up a mirror to us, and you see some good things and you see some not so great things, and I think, man, when we don't have our extracurricular activities and just our normal life to distract us, I don't know, you do find yourself either looking at yourself in the mirror quite a bit or looking at the people closest to you, because we're just around each other constantly.
Yeah, I think it's all the season of having things stripped away, and boundaries placed on all of us. Actually, I think the mirror has been there the entire time. It's just now we have the awareness and the time, and in some cases the boredom to actually peer into it. And I know for me, like the things that I know that I've screwed up on when I look in the mirror, the literal and the figurative mirror that we're talking about, it's easy to just kick myself when I'm down about those things, those shortcomings, those pitfalls. And I think this is a season of time where, and let me just go on record and say all of us are super fortunate to, not be infected. We have roofs over our heads. We've got food in the fridge. I even realized today, I was like, wow, I have 2 refrigerators. Like, yeah, there's a big blessing there, like don't lose sight of that. But Darren, I think it's interesting to just see this mirror a little bit more clearly, because I have been slowed down. I have been forced to take a look into it. And what we talked about on the show this episode was that God knows what we see. He's holding up the mirror, and when we look into it, he's in the reflection with us. I think that's the biggest point that we want to encourage you with, that he is near. He might even, it's not like he hasn't been near before COVID-19. It's just now he's, I think, using this in a way to draw us closer to him, which I think is ultimately his goal. His big goal is to be in relationship with his creation.
Yeah, I like the idea, Ryan, of like it's the mirror's always there, right? And I think we said on one of our, I don't know if it was the last time we recorded a show or if it was on one of our live streams where I shared that quote from, it's actually a quote from a book I'm reading called The Sacred Enneagram, and it said that if you're not self-aware, you can't self-correct. And we talked about that, right? Didn't we?
Yeah, we did. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. But like, I think there's always a mirror, right? To become self-aware of how you're self-medicating, of how you're self-distracting, of how you're self-destructing maybe. And most of the time, I think we run so hard and are so busy and maybe even purposely distracted that we don't take the time to really look at it and become aware of like, wow, this is really what's happening. I mean, I think it's those, it's those times of like, like there's a picture of me. It's about 10 years old, and it was I think it was an Easter picture when I was at East 91st Street, was on staff there, and yeah, it was about 10 years ago, and I was the heaviest I'd ever been. And I didn't really realize it then, but it's like, pictures are like those, snapshots mirrors, right? And like I've seen that picture before, and I mean, it's kind of like, well, what happened there? And it's like, every day, you're going by, you're not noticing where you're going, and that, pictures of that moment of like you get a chance. It's a mirror, right? Like this is what you really look like. You've been maybe distracting yourself, and maybe this is kind of like that as a season where you don't have anything to distract yourself with, and so now we're coming to terms with, wow, like either I'm really selfish or like I don't know. There's just so many different, I think, revelations that maybe we have the opportunity to have, and I just hope that we're not just choosing to continue to distract ourselves with mind-numbing things, whether it's food or alcohol or video games or just numbing out, watching TV. It's like to use this as a time to actually look in the mirror and realize that, yeah, God's there with you and he's not condemning you. He's like, hey, could we take a look at this?
Yeah, I like that. Well, and I think my tendency has been, I'm a pretty self-reflective person. I'm very self-aware, very emotionally intelligent, all of that. But in quarantine, I have found myself with the lack of space. I think we talked at one of our live streams last week just about the loudness of the season for me, externally and then internally with my thoughts. But what I've been realizing is what the mirror is showing me is that my selfishness leads to a very short fuse because of my lack of freedom, and that amps up my anxiety, which amps up my shame level, and so I'm in this weird spiral, and when I look too long at that without inviting God into that space, then I quickly grab the mirror and turn it on to somebody else in my house. Like I will turn the mirror so fast at my husband and go, well, I can't believe, can you just look at this? And try to point out all the bad things in him to make sure he's feeling as bad as I am, because it's too much for me to look in the mirror if I'm not doing it well, or I don't know if there's a right or wrong way to look in the mirror, but I would certainly say that when I have tried to do it alone, and not given myself the space and time to process what I see, then I am very quick to turn the mirror to somebody else and start playing the blame game and the victim and all of those other things, which I think are pretty easy to do in quarantine as well.
Do you guys feel it?
I think it's interesting to... sorry.
No, go ahead. Go ahead, Ryan.
I think it's interesting to hear you say, Lisa, that you're realizing that your short fuse and you wanting to point out the deficiencies or whatever you see in someone else's mirror is the core motivation behind that. Sounds like you still just don't want to be alone. It's like, I don't want to be alone and feeling this way, so I'm going to make you feel this way, so at the end of the day, I'm not alone. Even though it's like projection, it's still at the end of the day like you not wanting the loneliness is what I hear maybe between the lines.
Yeah, that's true. That's a good observation I've not thought of yet.
That's interesting.
Yeah, which it could be true too. Yeah, I want everybody. It's like misery loves company. But then I'm like, but I want you to fix it, because if you fix it, if I see you fix it, then maybe I'll actually fix it. Or maybe it's just, nope, it's too much. It's too much. And so I'm gonna turn that mirror to make sure somebody else sees their faults, so I don't have to see mine.
I love the conversation, and what is interesting is that what I'm thinking is, and maybe this is just quarantine exhaustion. I don't know, but we've been putting out, 3 live streams a week, and I'm trying to do a Facebook, live every day, and thinking deeply about a lot of this. And I feel like there's a part of me that's kind of like, I don't know. I don't want to make this seem like I'm lazy. I don't know. I'm lazy. I'm trying to. I should just talk instead of qualifying myself. There's a part of me that's kind of like, I'm tired of thinking deeply about how I'm processing this. There's a part of me that just I do want to be distracted. I want to go to a baseball game and do that. I want to just go get coffee. I think some of it, there's no doubt that taking some time to look in the mirror, whatever, it's healthy. But I think there's a part of it, and maybe this is the loneliness stuff you were saying, Lisa, is living like this for an extended amount of time it's not healthy for us as human beings, right?
Right.
It's going to weigh on us. You can't just sit there and I don't know, maybe you can sit there and look in the mirror and self, diagnose yourself and look deeply, but there's part of it where it's just kind of maybe it's because what we're doing in our profession, you know what I mean? But there's part of me that I'm kind of tired of thinking that deeply. Yeah.
Well, and that's what I think too, is where the giving ourselves grace comes in, because I'm with you. I can't, if I sat and stewed, and even if I was in the healthiest state of mind and invited God to sit with me and let's figure myself out, that's exhausting emotional, spiritual work that I don't think we're created to do all the time, because we're not created to sit inside of ourselves for a long extended periods of time without, extending that love and grace that we're receiving to another. And so that's a really good point of I don't think we're called to sit in quarantine and just diagnose ourselves so that when we emerge from quarantine, we're the best versions of ourselves that we've ever been. Sometimes I think, because I've heard, especially in the mom circles, it's right now it's how are you going to thrive, not just survive quarantine? And I'm like, you know what? For me, thriving in quarantine might look like surviving. I don't think quarantine needs to be my best season. And if I don't come out with the next great novel, or my kids don't come out reading at a 4th grade level, I don't care, right? I can only be who I am.
That's a great point, Lisa. I hadn't thought of it like that, but you're right. It's is that good enough? Is it good enough to say, hey, you know what? If I can survive, that's enough. I don't have to put this huge pressure on myself that, I got to come out of this, like you said, the best version of myself.
Right.
I mean, it's like saying to somebody, it's not the same as prison, but sometimes it feels like prison, right? I mean, there's so much of our freedom that's been taken away. It's to tell somebody, hey, you're going to be in a month of solitary confinement, and when you come out of it, we expect you to be the best version of yourself.
No,
that's not going to happen.
Right. Well, and even just and that this is not at all the same either. But what I was thinking was we don't tell somebody who's going through chemo, oh, come out of this the best version of yourself. That now, oh, you've got a lot of downtime. Great. Why don't you write the next great novel or whatever? Make sure you're getting creative with the things. And we talk about that. And of course, there's space and time for creativity. And chemo is not at all sitting at home in quarantine. But if we're being honest with ourselves, like, why are we expecting so much from ourselves that we're not expecting from, we wouldn't expect that from others in similar-ish situations?
Yeah, I think taking the pressure off of ourselves is what I hear us saying. Like, I follow a lot of different artists and creative types on social media, and some are saying like, hey, now it's the time to ramp it up. And others are like, yo, do the exact opposite. Like, this will still be here when we get out of this. It's interesting. I've been reading a lot. One, because I'm a total space nerd. Like, I just loved space as a kid. I just loved it. Like going to the planetarium or looking at the stars outside or whatever. But I was thinking about just researching this concept of quarantine. And astronauts, when they came back from the moon, like, nobody knew like what they were carrying back with them. And we've learned a lot since, you know, those flights out to the moon and all that stuff from the 60s. But there was an article I read about like what astronauts who've been to space and have to be like quarantined when they come back can teach us. And one of the best quotes in this story that I found online, I can share with you guys if you want, but Buzz Aldrin, who was on one of the Apollo missions, he said the secret of how he's passing the time while trying to stay safe from the coronavirus is, quote, lying on my ass and locking the door. Like, he's just like, I have no problem. And this is from a dude who's been isolated in space with like no contact back home. He's like, it's going to be okay. We're going to beat this thing, even though it seems like it's defeating us now. And I think what it's doing, like, it's causing us to reevaluate everything, right?
Yeah.
And on the end of this, I think things are going to be a lot leaner in society. I think the way we do work, I think the way we virtually connect now is kind of a primer to how things might become more and more normal for us as a society and a culture. But it's also going to lean a lot of like, I'm trying to think of in my own life. Like, I'm starting to think like, do I need a gym membership? Do I need one? Like, I'm working out at home now and it's fine. And it's like kind of great. And I'm like, do I need that? Do I need to do this, that, or the other? It's just like, I don't know, man. It's really teaching me a bunch of interesting things lately of just trying to listen to the Lord even more, like trying to help him or trying to have him help me be aware of what he's trying to do in my life and in my family's life. The tricky part, I hope at the end of this, I love my neighbors better than I have for like the decade that I've lived on my cul-de-sac. The reality is that there are people who live within 100 feet of my house. I don't even know their names. And my hope is that this kind of causes all of us not to revert to the bad, but to keep moving forward to the better.
Yeah, and I think that's the interesting thing about it is you look at major life interrupting things that have happened in history, you know, in the history of humanity, is that, you know, things like this change things forever. You know what I mean? You think about what 9/11 did as far as changing how life operated. You think about, I mean, even like World War II, right? I mean, like, you know, women have, entered the workforce, you know, in mass through World War II, and it's changed the way the world, you know, operates. And it's just, when you look back on this, what are going to be those long-term changes? And one of the things that, this show that we did, actually, I just realized, guys, we recorded this whole show and we never talked about Palm Sunday because it was Palm Sunday.
Oh, yeah.
And one of the things I talked about in my Palm Sunday sermon that I did for Mercy Road, now I kind of regret we didn't talk about this. No, when I began on Behind the Mic. But that, like, the Holy Week and Palm Sunday, like that week started out really great for the disciples. Like, it starts with the parade. Like, who doesn't love a parade, right? And everybody's cheering, Hosanna, Hosanna. Like, it's this awesome moment. And then by the next day, Jesus is, running people out of the temple and whipping animals, and it's, crazy. And then by, Thursday, he's betrayed, and Friday, he's dead. And the point I made in the sermon, which I think is good to know for right now, is that week for the disciples had to feel like the most upside down, life altering thing ever. like we have made a terrible mistake. Why did we follow this guy? Like, what is happening? This whole thing is a failure. Like, life will never be the same. And the point I made was that in that moment, Jesus was in. The sentence I said was, Jesus was in the past. He was in control of the current, and he was creating the future. All in this moment, which is a crazy thing to think about, is that in all the moments that happened, like Jesus didn't get distracted by the fame and by the adoration of people in the parade. He didn't crumble under the weight of the current moment. And it's like, part of it was because Jesus, he was in the past. Like, he is eternal. Like, there's nothing that has ever happened in the history of this universe that Jesus doesn't already have perspective on. So it's like, if we're looking for someone to guide us through this, it's like, he's not worked up about it. He was in the past. He has it, and he was completely in control of every current situation in all of Holy Week. Even when it looked like things were totally out of control, he was in control of it, and he still is in this moment right now. And then, the crazy thing is, even when it was the darkest, like on Saturday, right? On Saturday, he's dead. Like, they had a whole, they had 3 days where it's like, he's dead, he's gone. And in the darkest of moment, like, what he was actually doing was creating a future of a life that we, now have, that was the greatest possible thing, that we could actually have a relationship with him, and, not just now, but for eternity. And so that brings me great hope and confidence in the God that we follow through this. But even in the midst of it, I'm just thinking about, like, maybe here's maybe the overarching message of Behind the Mic today, is just to give yourself grace. Because I think about, like, that's what Jesus was doing in an amazing week like Holy Week, and the disciples completely deserted him.
Yeah.
Yeah, they pieced out.
Like, here's this moment of crisis where it's like, like, imagine if the disciples had gone through that and been like, guys, this probably should be your best week ever. You should probably come through this, better than you've ever been, because you've never experienced stress at this level and this kind of thing, where the guy you think is the Messiah, you watch him be beaten and crucified. So you probably should be doing this should be your best week ever. And it was like, under the pressure, it was their worst week ever. But
Peter chopped a dude's ear off. And Jesus still in that moment was like, okay, I'm going to fix your ear. Come here for a sec.
Yes.
Hold on. I know I'm getting arrested, but okay, your ear's good. And Peter, we've got some things still to teach you. And in about an hour, you're going to deny me 3 times. What I love about that, though, Darren, is like Holy Week, like you see this progression that, like, we can see, but the disciples were just in it, right? And they'd never experienced it, much like we've never experienced a global pandemic, mandated quarantine. Like, we've never done that before. And I find some comfort in the fact that after Jesus died, the disciples went back to what they knew. I find comfort in that. I find that, like, they were like, well, might as well go fishing again. And what I love about that story that is often overlooked, like in the whole, like, resurrection story, is that Jesus shows back up maybe on the same shore that he showed up the first time when he called Peter. What was that, 3 years prior? When he's like, hey, put your nets on the other side of the boat. And, like, this huge miraculous catch happens. Like, I never really caught it that he does the exact same thing. And he shows up, and they don't recognize him at first, but he's kind of giving them a little hint and a little wink of who he is, where he's like, hey, throw your nets on the other side. And they're like, where have we heard this before? And John freaks out. He's like, John immediately knows. He's like, it's Jesus. And Peter just jumps in the water towards the shore, and he's like, he falls at his feet. And in that moment, Jesus doesn't beat them up for their doubt or for their lack of faith. He's like, he literally says, let's have breakfast.
Well, that's why I like, he's actually already made them breakfast, right? I mean, isn't that how the story goes? Hasn't he already prepared them breakfast?
Yeah, they show up and they've got fish, like broiling fish on the shore.
Which how
brunch with Jesus.
How good of an image is that? Because think about it, they hadn't seen him since they completely deserted him. Like, it was his worst moment. It was their worst moment. They absolutely failed the process. And
Completely.
And the next
failed.
time they have an opportunity to see him face to face, he's not rebuking them. He's not disappointed in them. He's not like, really, guys, you couldn't thrive through the pandemic. It wasn't your best life. You didn't finish the book. You didn't write a new song. You like all these, like, he just says he welcomes them in relationship. He's already made them breakfast. Like,
yeah, he's like, you're probably hungry, aren't you? It's been a tough week, hasn't it?
That's good, dude.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's kind.
It's good stuff,
That's
man.
kind.
He's just awesome. He's just kind. He's a good dad.
That's kind of making me emotional, dude. Yeah, just like, when we're looking in the mirror and we're seeing the things that we don't want to see, when we're barely holding on, when we're being a great parent or the worst parent or the worst spouse, or like the next time that and the great part is we have access to be with God constantly because he's always near us, right? Is he says, yeah, it's been a tough week, hasn't it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but what he doesn't say is, oh, I've had it tougher.
Yeah.
Like, you guys weren't the one who was crucified. Like, he shows up and he's like, enjoy some fish, boys.
Yeah.
And then the real work starts, right? Like, isn't that when he commissions Peter? He basically reverses his 3 denials and he gives Peter this opportunity, this amazing grace-filled opportunity to be like, hey, Peter, do you love me? And like, it brings Peter to his knees.
Yeah.
Like, Peter can't handle the weight of the grace and the truth in that moment.
Right. Like, do you still want me to love you?
Yeah. Like, I'm always struck in these seasons, and this is why I hope, Darren, I love that you always talk about how the future is yet to be created. Like, I don't need to worry now about if I'm going to revert to being a selfish jerk when I finally can get out of my house. I don't need to worry about that now because it hasn't happened yet. Like, and it's not even what I need to worry about today. It's what do I need to embrace today? Because if I work towards it, the work is already done. Like, that it's this tension of like, do I have to work and earn God's love? No. It's this invitation that, are you ready to embrace it? Are you ready to accept this free meal on the seashore that's been prepared for you that is totally undeserved, and this invitation to be with him? And I think it's so easy for even those of us who've been Christians, for as long as we can remember, to forget that like the gospel and the invitation is for us too. And it's for us every single second of the day, regardless of the circumstances, right?
Yeah. So good, man. I hope that's hitting you as much as it's hitting me. 'Cause man, this has been a real hard week. This has been a hard month. And, man, it's such an honor that we get a chance to walk this with you. And we thank you so much for listening, for being a part of the radio theology community. And, God's for you, not against you. He's so near to you. He's not far away. And he really has created you on purpose and for a purpose. And we're going to make it through this. You can do today. We'll be here to encourage you. If we can pray for you in a specific way, please reach out to us. We thank you for those of you guys that have. We do take that seriously. We pray for prayer requests every Monday as a team, and we'd love to add you to that list. And there's a scripture that's coming to my brain, and it's in the Message paraphrase, and it. I'm trying to remember what it ends. It's talking about receiving God's grace and his help. And I think it says, take the mercy, accept the help, or something like that. And I can't remember what passage it is.
It's Hebrew.
I hear Lisa
It's
typing, looking
Hebrews,
it up.
It's Hebrews 4. Now that we know that we have Jesus, this great high priest with ready access to God, let's not let it slip through our fingers. We don't have a priest who is out of touch with our reality. He's been through weakness and testing. experienced it all but the sin. So let's walk right up to him and get what he is so ready to give. Take the mercy, accept the help. Dang. That's really good. Can I just read that one more time so that can sink in? Okay.
Yeah.
I'm going to try not to cry through it this time. Now that we know that we have Jesus, this great high priest with ready access to God, let's not let it slip through our fingers. We don't have a priest who is out of touch with our reality. He's been through weakness and testing, experienced it all but the sin. So let's walk right up to him and get what he is so ready to give. Take the mercy, accept the help. Oh, that's so good. That's Hebrews 4:14 through 16. That's the Message version. Ooh, I will for sure turn that. I'm going to turn that into a graphic and put that out on social media.
Do it.
If you need it.
Yeah.
But oh my gosh, that's so good. Walk right up to him and get what he's ready to give.
Yeah.
Well, we can't. I don't think we can say anything else better than that. So we'll close on that note. And beautiful, beautiful words. Thank you, Jesus. And we'll talk to you next time, right here on Behind the Mic, the spiritual deep dive of radio theology. Love you. Have a great week.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Behind the Mic, the spiritual deep dive conversation of radio theology. If you have a question to ask Pastor Daron or have any questions for any of the radio theology cast, just email us at Daron, Ryan, or Lisa at blackbirdmission.com. And be sure to share this episode with a friend who could use a little encouragement. Talk to you next week right here on Behind the Mic.